And we are rolling, and I'm excited because I just found out. I thought like today or the next one would be the end, but Cheryl's only on page 10 of 19. So we get to do more of these, which I really like. I want to thank you for your style in doing it because a lot of times people have questions and we never get to them, or we get to them at a later date. And I prefer the interruption of responding to the chat. I prefer it. I
I
like
do.
it's real time. I like that it's relevant. It might be a question that other people have. So thank you, Cheryl Beck, for this idea. And
Well,
we are, for those of you who have not been with us the previous ones, you're welcome to go back. I don't think coming in the middle will affect anything, but we are on part 4 of the Greenbaum speech. Cheryl is reading it line by line and then sharing her testimony and her experience based on that speech and how it really was. I can't talk. How it really was a groundbreaking at the time.
it was groundbreaking. And again, Corey Hammond, such an extraordinary individual for making this a double blind study with other therapists across the nation, Canada, Australia, who had SRA patients. And he would have the therapist ask the patients questions to respond to, but the therapist didn't know why they were asking the question. So that's a perfect double blind study. So he was very wise in coming to this particular speech. Um, and again, he was threatened so badly after this speech, he never acknowledged it again. Very key in unlocking the programming that was going on in their SRA MK Ultra families around the globe. They had come up with a system, and he found the system.
So I know you don't have exact numbers and, can't prove anything or whatever. You just have a very educated, experienced opinion. How many people in America do you think have been affected by this, if you had to estimate?
Can we say 1 in 10? I
Wow.
think because it never stopped.
30 million Americans.
You know, the late Russ Dizdar had better numbers than I did because he was on the front lines until his death, and he spoke about something called the Black Awakening, and that involves all those that came after me because my programming was in the 60s and 70s. All the modern programming that has continued on, it never ended. It is easily triggered in the media these days in all forms of entertainment, music, what have you. So here's all these potential program people out there. And I really do think that a lot of our major universities had programming centers. I know they did, back in the 60s. I could name a few. But so yeah, I think it's that bad. I think it's that bad. And if it's not, the typical deep trauma programming that we're talking about here, it's definitely through TV and movies and frequencies in music that implant these ideas
Yes.
into people. So all I had to do, number one, I got super upset when I saw Pokemon Go come out because I knew that that was a beta test to see what privacy people would give up to play a game.
Yeah. Oh, I
And then,
remember that because they had to show where they were and they were going to very odd places, like, out in the middle of the woods. And it's really kind of creepy, actually.
yeah, people died. They were so into this virtual reality game that they would run out in front of cars. My son was a police officer at the time on the graveyard shift, and he was lights and sirens, 35 miles per hour going down the road, and this kid hooked into his phone, just ran straight out in front of him, lights and sirens and everything. And, he managed to avoid hitting him. But they had code Pokemon going in the police department. And when I saw that,
You were like, okay,
and
something's
I
up here.
realized that they had done that, they had done that over 2 decades, going on a third decade, where these kids grew up with Pokemon. They were really into it. And now they get to introduce their kids to it. And they loved it when they were a kid. So it went another decade and it went another decade. And they gave up all their privacy on their phone so they could download that virtual reality game. And when I
Wow.
saw that, I knew we were in trouble
Yeah.
because it so easily went across the population.
You're such a hip grandma. I mean, how many grandmas know this stuff? I mean, gosh, you're amazing. Okay, so let's do our normal warning. I'll let you do it.
All right, this is a trigger warning for anybody that's working through SRA MK Ultra memories. This can, with the code words in it and with the codes in it, it can trigger you to switch into an alter personality. So I would turn it off, take it to your therapist or person that you're deprogramming with or working through things with. Have a support person there in case this would trigger you. And it can be very beneficial to your therapy to do that, because in this, it does hold codes that can unlock your programming and help you through your trauma memories and recover from that trauma.
Very good. Very good. Is there any other things that we should cover as far as like housekeeping? I think that was it though. Just the Oh, I know. If people want to find it, I added the. It's just a PDF. I don't know if it's the same one that Cheryl is, reading from, so the pages might be off, but it is a PDF that has the Greenbaum speech. So that's all I can think of. We can start rolling if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Oh, and if everyone, anyone here, if you have questions, like I said, we're really open to handling these as they come. And if we end up with part 12, that's fine. We don't care.
Yeah, I love to hang out with Carmen. And this is
Yay!
just
I
like
get to
sitting in
hang out.
front of a campfire, having a discussion. It's comfortable, it's wonderful. And I really like to answer questions. I really do,
Yeah.
to help people understand that,
Yeah.
the plan against humanity through this type of stuff. So anyhow, all right, so we had just discussed, it's on page 10 if you ran off I think it's called bibliocapades or something like that, the one I ran off. And it's on page 10 of that one.
All right. I'm going to
Of
try and
the,
find that one while you're reading, and then I'll put it in
okay.
here. Okay.
And we came through a paragraph where it begins, the key word in their name is foundation. He's talking about the system within people related to the Kabbalah tree, which is the green balm or green tree programming he found within the survivors. So he's talking to somebody who is in his treatment, and he is asking now what happens if the cult finds out that they talked to him. So this paragraph begins, if the cult simply found out that you talked to me, that you shared information with me, you tell me what they would do to you. Emphasize that the only way out is through me or through the therapist, and they need to cooperate and share information and help me or their therapist, and that I'll help them. So all these parts can give you various information. Again, the parts are the alters, again, of their internal system that was built by their programmer. Now, they have tried to protect this programming very carefully. Let me give you an example with Ultra Green. I discovered this. By the way, I used to think this programming was only in bloodline people. What do we mean by bloodline? We mean the 13 Luciferian family bloodlines that control the world. So, for instance, I was born into a bloodline family, one of the 13. But it's a bit different. Um, I've I've discovered in non-bloodline people, I'm sorry, but it's a bit different. They don't want it to be just the same. In other words, the programmers don't want it to be same as the bloodline people. So they're finding it in non-bloodline survivors too, but there's variations. It's like something special is saved if you're bloodline versus if you're non-bloodline. But let me tell you something that I discovered first in a non-bloodline and then in a bloodline. We were going along and a patient was close to getting well, approaching final integration, and this is a non-bloodline person, and she suddenly started hallucinating, and her fingers were becoming hammers and other things like that. So I used an affect bridge, and we went back and we found that what happened was they gave suggestions that if she ever got well to a certain point, she would go crazy. All right, so we'll stop right there for a second. So she's literally watching her fingers morph into hammers and going on an LSD trip. When he says I use an affect bridge, I looked that up because what's an affect bridge? And what it is they find the feeling and they find that particular feeling connected to a memory, and they go back and they trace that particular feeling, that particular memory, and they trace it back to its source. They reframe the memory and then rehearse new patterns of coping where they won't see their fingers turning into hammers, and they realize that that was a LSD trip. And when they feel that feeling and get it out, that now when that trigger hits, they can choose an appropriate coping mechanism to realize, okay, that was a trigger. I don't have to participate in an LSD trip anymore, and this is the way I'm going to handle it from here on out. So
Did
that's
you
when
have any of those?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's one of the core of the programs to send you back into those.
Drugged
The
out.
strongest one for me, was the spin programming that we talked about. You
Right.
know, when you hit on something that does not fit the narrative of what you were told about the history of your life, you know, and when it doesn't fit, and it's so traumatizing that immediately the spin program kicks in. You get literally like a roulette wheel spinning vertigo in your head, severe pain, nausea.
Vertigo's bad enough. I can't imagine it being that strong.
Yeah. And I've
Well,
had
and it
dramatic
makes you like
vertigo.
I've had vertigo a few times in my life, and it makes you unsure of yourself. Like you don't trust your own body.
I've had it so bad from the organic brain injuries that I have, you know, that I can't find myself in space at all. I mean, I am on the floor. I have to stick my head down to the floor and crawl along like that, get my rescue meds, which I kept on a locked cabinet on the floor because when that vertigo hit after my brain injury, that's the only way I could get to the
Wow, that was
rescue med.
smart of you though.
And then just lay there until it kicked in and took effect, you know, and calm that down. But so that's really severe vertigo where you
And
can't, I
so
mean, everything
if this was breaking open while you were in a therapist's office, that could actually happen where
yeah.
you would go to the ground.
Oh yeah. In fact, I did most of my therapy sitting on the floor with my back against a chair and the wall right behind me because I have to be able to see everything. It's like soldiers that come home. They have to be able to see the entire room, where the exits are, where the entrances are with PTSD. It's the same sort of thing, you know, and
Yeah.
since most of my alters were children, they felt more comfortable on the floor
Yeah.
than sitting in the chair.
Makes
So,
sense. That makes sense. Wow. And I do have such compassion for that because you're so afraid of surprises. Like you never know when the ground's going to fall out from under you or when you're walking on eggshells or whatever. So I could see that 100%. Okay, keep going. And then I'm just going to raise my hand if somebody puts a question in there.
okay. And I'll probably forget that you're going to do that. Help me out.
You know me, I'll
Uh,
interrupt.
anyhow, the way they did this was to strap this patient down, give her LSD when she was 8 years old. I can remember the LSD trips they did on me, 4 and 5 and 6 in kindergarten. I colored, like, if there was a picture of a cat and you're supposed to color it in, I would do like multiple colors down the cat. I was trying to tell people that these cats were like morphine in all these colors, and because they were constantly giving us LSD. Anyhow, when she began hallucinating, they inquired about the nature of the hallucinations so they could utilize them in good Ericksonian fashion and build on them, and then combine the drug effect with powerful suggestions. If you ever get to this point, you will go crazy. If you ever get fully integrated and get well, you will go crazy like this, and you'll be locked up in an institution for the rest of your life. Those were about the same programming lines I got, and it always ended with a suicide. So you might as well kill yourself. So you would be locked up in an institution for the rest of your life. They gave those suggestions vigorously and repetitively. Finally, they introduced other suggestions that rather than have this happen, it would be easier just to kill yourself. In a bloodline patient, then, as I began inquiring about deep material, the patient started to experience similar symptoms. We went back and we found the identical things were done to her. And it was done to me, and I figure it was done to most people. This was called the Greenbaum, BOMB, self destruct. Lots of interesting internal consistencies like that play on words with Dr. Greenbaum, his original name. Now, in this case, it was done to her at age 9 for the first time, and then only hers was different. Hers was a suggestion for amnesia. If you ever remember anything about ultragreen and the green tree, you will go crazy. You will become a vegetable and be locked up forever. Then finally, the suggestions added, and it would be easier to kill yourself than just have that happen to you if you ever remember it. So I call those the word chains of programming. Mine were 4 steps. You know, now you look like your father. Your father was crazy. You can't do this to your kids, so you might as well kill yourself. So yeah, and it was like
What
the light
prevented you from doing that?
love for my kids.
Yay, love.
I couldn't do that to my children. I couldn't do that to my children.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they held. They were why I came back when I died, and they kept me from suicide. I could not do that to my kids.
That literally makes me want to tear up. I love it. God is
Because
good.
children blame themselves for everything that happens, in their world. So I didn't want to leave them with that. Plus, as a Christian, I just don't believe you
Sure.
go to hell if you commit suicide. I don't believe that because people are so mentally ill when that happens. However, you know, God holds when I die, and I'm not going to take myself out by my own hand.
Same.
At age 12, then, 3 years later, they used what sounds like an Amytal interview to try to breach the amnesia. Amytal is like a truth serum type thing.
Okay.
And found out if they could. They couldn't. So then they strapped her down again, took and gave her something to kind of paralyze her body. In my experience, that was scopolamine. They used that all the time on me. They gave her LSD, an even bigger dose, and reinforced all those suggestions. Did a similar thing at the age of 16. So these are some of the booby traps you run into. There are a number of cases where they combine powerful drugs like this with suggestions to keep us from discovering some of this deeper level stuff. What's the bottom? Your guess is as good as mine, but I can tell you that I've had a lot of therapists who were stymied with each case, who were going nowhere. In fact, someone here that I told some basic information about this to in Ohio a couple of months ago said it opened all sorts of things up in a patient who had been going nowhere. That's an often common thing. I think that we can move down to deeper levels, and if we deal with some of the deeper level stuff, it may destroy all the stuff above it. So he was still in the process of learning all this when he was sharing it too.
So he's so brave. So I have a question, and it's based on not a question in the chat, but what someone said in the chat. She said, so interesting. I don't like surprises either, nor opening packages or presents. And I too need to know where all the exits are at all times. Did you ever come to a place where you can be at peace in a new environment and not have your back to the wall or know where all the exits are? Or do you still have that a little bit of caution when you're walking into new areas?
I still have that caution. It's not so much a fear of surprises or based out of fear. But I'm sorry, this world is crazy, and it's more like a wisdom
Sure.
kind of scenario.
I love that there's a line there, and you're
Yeah.
so right, because it goes that same way with trust. You know, I used to blindly trust people, and now I don't. And people will be like, well, you're so suspicious. No, I just have seen enough of the world that I'm watching, right? So now my dad was a Marine. He's like, don't be afraid, Carmen, be cautious. And I think that's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Especially if I'm with children. Especially if I'm with children, you know, if I'm I was a lifeguard for years, and if I'm at a water park or a lake or a river, I'm automatically everybody's lifeguard. You know, I'm not only watching my children, and I saved a little one from drowning. He had just walked out into this lake and kept walking, and his parents were nowhere. And he was just walking with his arms out, lugging in the water. You know, and I raced in and got him. His mom finally came running down, and she was very pregnant, you know. So it's things like that. I always become the lookout,
You're
the
the
one
lifeguard.
watching. Yeah, I'm protective of children.
Yeah. Which
And
I wish more people were like you instead of trying to suck their innocence out of them.
yeah, it's and it happens so frequently now. It's like people are so angry out there now that situations you never would have seen before are happening right in front of your face. And you know, when I was in line at Circle K, and I had to tell these people, knock it off, take your argument outside. There are children in here, and you know, you don't need to be doing this. And you're on mute there.
Yeah, and you didn't have any problems with them? They listened to you and they went ahead and got out?
They calmed down, they paid for their stuff, went outside and started again. So
That's okay. That's okay.
that's okay. Take it outside.
Then you
kids.
go out there and you go, oh, there's children walking through the parking lot. Perhaps you could take this home or fight in the car.
Yeah, take it home, please. You know, it was like she was screaming to prove that he loved her, to buy her a scratch off ticket.
Mm.
You know, and he was going, I love you, but I'm not. But they were I'm sure they had some substances on board, and they were very loud about everything. If people are standing their distances away, and I'm just like, hey, would you knock it off? Can we just check out here?
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, I don't stand by and don't not do anything. All right. So he thought if they could get, you know, down to the deep level, it would take care of some of this lightweight stuff, you know, in the programming. We'll take
And
an
do you
erase.
agree with that philosophy? Do you think, because I know you said he was in the middle of learning all of this, did it end up that he was correct?
No.
Okay. It's just a way. It's not the way.
Trauma is trauma is trauma. And with each programming level, it might be a lighter degrees of trauma. Okay, I wasn't locked in a coffin and buried underground with spiders poured in and everything, but it was still a traumatic event that changes my perception of me and the world around me. So the better thing to do, in my opinion, and it was, the opinion of all the experts at the time I went through therapy, was to go for the traumas, and then the programming automatically is,
Detangles.
yeah, um, yeah. So then they can, if there's a trauma and they're having a flashback, then the programming usually comes out, but it doesn't. For me, it didn't wipe anything else out. It could be different for other people, really, because when I got my memories back, they came like a flood. Everything, we didn't have to go digging for anything. Um, and again, that was to overwhelm me, so I feel crazy, da da da, and kill myself. So, um, yeah, I think it's more doing a trauma recovery
Got
type
it.
of therapy.
Thank you.
But he's a hypnotherapist, so there's a difference too. All right, so I typically find I'll say to them, now that we've done this, are there any other memories and feelings that any parts that were Omega still have? The answer is usually no. At that point, I will say I usually find at this point in time the majority, if not all, of those parts that used to be Omega, and Omega again is that self termination um, line, no longer feel a desire or need to be different, realizing that you split off originally by them and want to go home to be with the person who he's called Mary in this, and become one with her again. In other words, it's like I've said, I found out these alters were children and they just want to be kids and not do adult type jobs and that. So they just want to release it and go play or go to sleep or whatever, and just give it up to the adult in the body, that's in control of the body. I use the concept often now, which came from a patient, of going home and becoming one with her. Going back from whence you came is another phrase I'll use with them. Are there any Omega parts inside who do not feel comfortable with that or have reservations or concerns about that? If there are, we talk to them, we deal with them. A few may not integrate. My experience is most of the time they'll integrate, and we may integrate 25 parts at once in a polyfragmented complex MPD patient. Um, I found that all the Cheryl fives, so H5, could come together, and then first, and then they could give up their jobs and go in my safe house that I created in my mind, and get cleaned up and get their special gowns and pick a bedroom and go to sleep or go out and play. And in this hacienda in my mind, when I come back to check how many were in the house, there weren't as many. They just spontaneously were part of me. So yes,
What did the 5 mean? Do you know?
eight,
It
the
meant
eight,
what? Oh, it was your age.
yeah, 5 years old, yeah.
Wow. How many do you think there were?
I would say I had 25 to 30,
5-year-olds.
well, strong programmed alters. And then I had all these little pieces too. 5 years old was a bad age. There were a lot of 5-year-olds. Um, so I can't really put a number on it
Yeah, no,
because
that's fine. I just was curious.
Cheryl 5 at Scotty's Castle, or Cheryl 5 at, with the Black Widow, or Cheryl 5, when they were really doing the intense stuff with me. So, a lot of them.
Sick bastards, man. Excuse my language, but they are sick.
They're not human. They're demonized puppets.
100%.
All right, I'm on page 12 now. I think it is vitally important to abreact the feelings before you go on. Absolutely. You got to get those feelings out because they're stuck in your body, in every cell in your body, and you don't want that trauma to continue in your life. So get those feelings out of what um, each alter recalls. Also, for many patients, did you have a question?
Yeah, somebody had a question. So she said, "Do you ever take those parts to Jesus?" I'm assuming she's talking about the 5-year-olds because there's a little delay, um, and have him restore them, and then return those soul parts back to you.
Okay, how I set my recovery up was what we did was we made I they want you to think about a safe place. Okay, a safe place where once these little ones or these altars come forward, they can go to this safe place where nobody's going to hurt them, absolutely protected, where they can heal. All right. So in my mind's construct, I thought, well, there's no place on earth safe, right? So my safe place was on a fortress on clouds, held up by warrior angels,
Like in the
uh,
heavenlies.
and outside in the front there was a healing pool about the size of a jacuzzi where angels stood around, and that little one would go to the angels. They'd walk them down the healing pool. They would come out with long white flannel nightgowns, little ballerina slippers, little bloomers on, all comfy and cozy.
Aww.
Um, and then I had a hacienda type building with a swimming pool around it and a moat bridge. So we could lock up, if there was any threat.
And so, did you create this young, or is this something you
No,
created
this
for
is
your
something I
healing?
did. Yeah, this is
Okay.
what I did for my
That's
healing.
beautiful. I love that. And so somebody asked another question. Actually, there's a couple more, I think. Um, how do you know you have alters? And then they said, how do you get the bad feelings out?
How do you know you have altars? I would say if you hear a myriad of consciences, we talked about this when we first started doing this. I thought I was so nasty and so bad as a little child that I need all these consciences in me talking to me to tell me what to do, when to do it, how to dress, how to look, how to behave. And it was just always a bombardment of all this. And I didn't know it wasn't normal. I didn't know there could be peace in this brain at all, you know. Um, Also, with alters, losing time is the big one. Now, I thought, uh, when the memories came back, I was then DID-NOS rather than DID. I didn't lose time or anything like that, but I found my extreme mood swings, ways of dressing, arguments over what to wear, everything like that were actually alters.
That makes so much sense.
One liked to read, one liked to draw, one liked to do music, and so they were like extreme moods, but eventually they had a name to that. And so they were all, things I like to do, but it was all chopped up behind amnesia walls. So, yeah, if you lose time, like I have been talking with somebody for years now, that's much older than me in age, and they have things that they bought that they don't remember buying with receipts, and you don't know how you got from one place to another. um, I can remember when I was in DID, it was like, didn't I just go to sleep and I'm waking up for a new day? And then we talked about me forgetting my locker numbers and where my classrooms were and all that type of stuff. So, yeah.
It's good stuff, Cheryl. Good stuff. And then somebody was saying here, and I think it's a good idea to share what other people have done. Deborah said, "My safe rooms are in my body, and the rooms are filled with the presence of Jesus, and the doors are sealed with his blood, so we are safe." What do you think of
Right.
that?
I think that's great. What I didn't get to with my safe place was Jesus would come there and play with the little ones, roll down the grassy hill, read them Bible stories, things like that. So he was, involved in that healing too. And definitely, through it all, there was a lot of prayer and just talking back and forth with, the Holy Spirit and everything. So I really, in my opinion, I don't think people can heal all the way without Jesus. I
I
really
agree.
don't.
I personally agree.
Because of the spiritual damage that's done. And that's not talked about here with Dr. Hammond, but they fully intend to corrupt your spirit and wound you so bad in your spirit that you think that Lucifer is
You're
stronger
irre-
than God.
you're irredeemable too. I think that's part of it,
Yeah.
which we
So
know is impossible.
no, no, Jesus paid for it all. You just have to accept it, accept Him. And so yeah, there's a lot of spiritual transformation that goes on through this and soul, restoring your soul and spirit.
And so, someone in the chat doesn't remember anything before the age of 13. Would you, in your opinion, bet that she's probably had some programming?
If not programming, some severe trauma. Again, let's look at programming as trauma because they use trauma to program. So again, a good trauma therapist can help people recover from DID because it's all based in trauma.
Makes sense. And then Trina Picarello was saying that EMDR helps a lot.
It helps a lot. It helps a lot, and that was just coming out when I was finishing therapy. Um, One of my children just went through severe PTSD, off the charts PTSD, and it really helped them. You know, for them, mom abandoned them, so there was an issue with mom abandoning them, and so with EMDR, turned out it was just the circumstances of me being sick and going to the hospital so many
Sure.
times and them being too little to go into the hospital and visit me. So they felt like I was making them not visit me.
Absolutely. Get it.
It was the hospital rules.
I have a cousin whose wife got Hodgkin's and breast cancer while she was pregnant, and she had to have a full mastectomy like right after the baby was born, and I mean all this crazy stuff. And so when she returned, she couldn't embrace the child. She couldn't bring it to her chest. She couldn't nurse it. She couldn't even hold it. So of course, like, she had older children too. It was a big family, and my cousin's a very loving man. That child, her whole spirit was stunted to the point that I think she ended up only being like 4'8" or 4'10" or something like that. She was tiny. Like, it literally morphed her down into a smaller human, which I thought was fascinating. And she's adorable. She's so cute, and she's doing great in life now. But it was wild how that period of just 2 months, how important it was.
Right. That almost sounds like failure to thrive. They call it failure to thrive, with children like that. And, staying small is a perpetual, they look like a child. So they're going to need mommy's embrace and hug and yeah, makes total sense to me.
All right. And then somebody else shared something. I like hearing these stories, even though they're little short stories. Um, where is it? I too have a safe place with two houses because I have two parts that have stayed. A beautiful meadow, the other side of the river of living water. That's cool.
Now, spiritually, I find that, for instance, I've been taking care of my little granddaughter now since she was very, an infant, and in those nap times when I was holding her, I would be talking to Jesus, and it seemed like we always met in that meadow. And, you know, her funny things were funny to him too. I mean, he created her to be that funny. She is hysterical. And so it was a time in the spirit that that, you know, I was just kind of rejoicing with Jesus over, being thankful for all the things in my life. And it was a deep, I guess you'd call it a meditation, but I just, went deep inside and spent that time holding her, and then we'd be playing in the meadow and with her and things like that.
So cute.
So I think there is, what I'm saying is, I think there is that place for us to go, that Goshen for us to go to within each of our spirits where we can commune with God. And it's interesting that it's a meadow for her too, you know?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a question though. As far as she said two have stayed, what do you think? And I know that we've talked about it offline, but I think it's interesting for people to know. What do you think of people choosing to keep one or two? Do you think it's dangerous without them knowing? Do you think it's a personal choice? Do you think it's something you turn over to God? Just share what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I didn't integrate Sarge fully. I say we're connected at the hip. Sarge is a 40-year-old Army combat mode guy, with great authority. He's been through it all. And his confidence that he speaks from. Now, it's my voice, okay? And I don't turn into helter skelter
It's not like you're
demonic voice.
channeling.
Yeah. But there have been probably 3 times where I was physically threatened, physically, like I was going to get hurt, and I stepped back, and Sarge took over with his confidence and authority, and all he, this big huge guy, 300 pounds, 6 foot something, threatened to grab me and drag me behind the building and rape me. And Sarge steps forward, and the guy said, "So what do you think about that?" And Sarge said, "Well, son, I'll just have to take you out." And his eyes got huge, and he backed away,
He
and
believed you.
he freaked it. Yeah, he freaked out, and he
Yeah.
he left me alone.
Does it not scare you that there could be pieces of Sarge that you're not aware of that could be what's the word? Latent or hidden?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, not at this point, because it is all me.
Right.
Sarge is me. It's my creation to cope with overwhelming circumstances, and the skills are right there. And Sarge was always defensive. Um, they used live fire against a group of kids that Sarge, was bleeding through the forest when it was supposed to be just war games, and they used live bullets. And Sarge lost it, of course. And we had a big military incident, getting those kids into the helicopter and taking off under that live fire. And nobody could outfly Sarge. And so there had to be negotiations to bring those kids back, or to make
All
sure those
right.
kids are safe.
Another question popped up. I would love Cheryl's opinion. How do you think babies differentiate between abuse and medical intervention? This is such a great question. When my son had to have heart surgery, I was horrified because I was like, what is the difference between some child that has been pinned down to, do whatever, and the way he had to be pinned down to get blood, or whatever it was that they were doing, and it was regular because his pericardium and his he got a complete staph infection around his heart, and so it took him a long time to figure out what antibiotic would work, and he
Yeah.
literally almost died. And so he went through so much, weeks and weeks at the hospital. So I love this question. And I think with your nursing background, you'll be able to share a differentiate if there is one.
I don't think little ones can differentiate that.
Yeah, it sucks.
And, that's something when they get a little older to address with them.
Yes.
I remember when my daughter was 5, she kept getting recurrent staph infections and scarlatina, and on antibiotics for like 5 months. And we finally found out that dad was an asymptomatic carrier and he needed to be treated. Well, you put antibiotics in a little girl for that long, you're going to get a yeast infection, right? And so putting the medication on her was almost like being molested, and we had to work through that because,
Yeah.
in their mind, they're being held down and being molested,
Right.
you know.
Right. No, and I
So,
mean, it's horrible what they make them go through, and it does make you wonder if we aren't supposed to be turning all medical things over to God. But that's a whole nother show. I agree with you. Actually, that's the determination I came to, was how horrific. I literally participated in the trauma, but it's trauma that had to happen, or he would have died. He had a hole in his
yeah,
heart. So
yeah. And it's just like, well, as a parent, now with my children in their 30s coming up with all these issues because mom, was in the hospital so frequently, and or mom was the crazy person in the community, and the bullying that went on, that has to be talked through. And unfortunately, they
sure.
haven't been so willing to work through that with me. I'm willing anytime, but they want to do it their way.
Yeah,
And
no, and I get it. It's part of what the problem is when you're a victim of any kind, you don't want to take that pill. How do I know? Because I had to take that pill. It's very bitter, and you have to admit your part in it. And it's so much easier to be the good guy, that it's mom's fault or it's the ex's fault, or, whatever. 100% agree.
yeah, but love conquers all, and if you can come together and be honest and work through it, it's you can heal. And God, that's God's promise. Yeah, so that's why.
That was a great question, by the way.
Yeah, that was excellent.
And I love your answer. And I did do this. I did talk to him about it younger, but I didn't do it older. And I think I should. I'm going to talk to him about it tonight at dinner. you know?
Yeah, yeah, just any feelings that mom intended to hurt you, or the doctors or dad, or I remember it was interesting. When I was 5, I had a really severe ear infection and had to go to the doctor in the middle of the night. My father took me because my mom had just had my baby sister, had to be home. My father took me, which is scary to begin with at age 5. He was already a perpetrator. But I went, and it was the good doctor, not hair doctor at the pediatrician's office. It was the good one. But I had a bubble on my eardrum. He had a lance. And what happened was I saw like 20 people holding me down when he did that. And it was just my father holding me down. And, but what I did was have a flashback to when I was 4 during a ritual where they held me down and did something to me. And so already at 5, when I remember, and I, always remember that trauma, and I know it had to happen or I'd lose my hearing, blah, 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 blah. But um, I saw 20 people holding me down.
Wild.
And so, yeah.
So it was just as damaging. Well, not just as, but it was very traumatic. And that's the thing. I'll never forget. I used to listen to Dennis Prager all the time, and I think he's very wise, and he has, studied a lot. Whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, I don't know. But he shared something that I have repeated so many times in my life, and that is children are amazing recorders. They will remember everything, but they're horrible interpreters because they don't have the nuance. They don't have the mature outlook. They don't, so they just see it as this hurt or this didn't feel good or mom was mad at me or whatever, when really that wasn't at all what was happening, but that's the way they interpreted it. And I've even seen like people like my son who are like that strong like lion kind of guy, assume other people are that way too, you know, and they're not like him. And so I could see that.
Yeah, the older we get, the more we see. And it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah. But I think
That
it's good for everybody to know that. And I also think it's what you tell your kids before you say, go get fixed before you get married. It doesn't matter who you are, even if you didn't have massive trauma, if you interpreted it as trauma, you need to fix it.
yeah, and it's not, yeah, therapy is a good thing. Let me just say that.
Yeah, it depends. You got to find someone good, but it's
Right.
worth looking for. And I do believe that if you ask the Holy Spirit to lead you to the right books, the right people, you will sort through it if you have nothing else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what the Holy Spirit is there for. It's our comforter, so yes, with prayer and finding the scriptures and the promises and applying that and getting it. The hard part for me is getting it from head knowledge to down in my heart, that I know that I know that I know that I know. And I recently went through divorce, even though we've been separated 14 years, and it's brought up some things that I didn't think were still there. So I'm going back into therapy if I can find a good therapist.
There you
In the
go.
meantime, I'm talking to the Holy Spirit about it. It's like, I don't need to carry this anymore.
Nope, it's not
I
yours.
don't want to carry this, so let's work on it and finding healing scripture and things like that. So yeah, there's ways to heal yourself. Kathy O'Brien highly recommends journaling
Journaling, yeah.
and
And
taking
she
it.
said that I remember reading her book, and she said that even she would be driving, she'd be in the car. Well, she wouldn't be the one driving, but she'd be in the car, and even just a billboard she passed, something would trigger, and she would pull out her journal and start writing because she never knew when they were going to come up.
Right. Yeah, our brains are amazing, and God is the one that created them, so He knows how to fix them too. So
Thank the Lord.
all right, are we good on time?
Yeah, let's go at least 15 more minutes if that's cool with you.
Yeah. All right. All right, let's start at this top of the page again. I think it's vitally important to abreact the feelings before you go on. Also, for many patients, it hasn't seemed to matter the order we go in, but I found a couple where it has. If it doesn't seem to matter, I'll typically go omega, then delta, because they have more violence potential than gamma to get rid of the self-deception stuff. All right, again, omega is the self-termination, self-harm. Delta are the killers and the violent ones, so you don't want them to be acting out for sure. And then gamma is more the self-deception and chaos and confusion sowers. So yes, the most critical first is what he's talking about. What I will do before I just assume anything and do that is, once we've done omega and showed them that success can occur and something can happen and they feel relief after, I will say to them, I want to ask the core through the fingers. Again, he's talking about, his hypnosis method, and when they raise their finger, somebody has something to say. Is there a specific order in which programs must be erased? Maybe it doesn't matter, but most of the time I found no. There are cases where we found yes. I recommend doing one or two or three of those because they'll produce relief and a sense of optimism in the patient. But then I would recommend starting to probe for the deeper level things and getting their input and recommendations about the order in which we go. Now he's opening up questions. So somebody in the audience asked, what has been the typical age and typical gender of this type of person? Dr. Hammond replies, I know of this being found in men and women. Most of the patients I know with MPD ritual abuse that are being treated are women. However, I know of some men being treated where we found this. A while back, I was talking to a small group of therapists somewhere. I told them about some of this. In the middle of talking about some of this, all the color drained out of one social worker's face, and she obviously had a reaction. And I asked her about it, and she said, I'm working with a 5-year-old boy. She said, just in the last few weeks, he was saying something about a Dr. Green. So this little guy,
They might catch him in time,
yeah, yeah, I get goosebumps reading that because it's like they can save him right now from what's happening to her, to him. I'm sorry. I went on a little further and I mentioned some of these things, and she just shook her head again. I said, what's going on? She said, he's been spontaneously telling me about robots, and about Omega. What 5-year-old talks about Omega,
Yeah, you might get the robots, but definitely not Omega.
Right. I think you will find variations of this and that they've changed it probably every few years and maybe somewhat regionally to throw us off in various ways, but the certain basics and fundamentals will probably be there. I have seen this in people up into their 40s, including people whose parents were very, very high in the CIA, other sorts of things like that. I've had some that were originally part of the Monarch project, which is the name of the government intelligence project. So, any questions on that? We'll go to the next question.
I don't see any questions so far, and you know me, I'll just interrupt.
All right. So another question, I'm still not grasping how one starts, how you find out how to erase, how you get that information. Dr. Hammond replies, I would say I want the core, if necessary, using the telepathic communication ability you have to read minds, because they believe that kind of stuff. So I'll use it. I was trained in Ericksonian stuff to obtain for me the erasure codes of all Omega programs. When you've done so, I want the yes finger to float up. Then I ask them to tell it to me. Are there 6 backups for Omega programs? Yes. Okay. How many backups are there? 6, they say. Let's say it's different numbers. Is there an erasure code for all the backup programs? No. Is there an erasure code that combines all the backups into one? Yes. Obtain that code for me, and when you've got it, give it to me, the yes signal again. It can move almost that fast in some cases where there's not massive resistance. So, yeah, you're muted.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to make sure I don't interrupt, but it's fascinating because they literally say no to one way, but say yes to another. So it's like a backdoor that they hadn't thought of. It's almost like AI. It's weird.
Well, some people believe that they've actually put computer parts in their brain. You have, and this is kind of the way he's talking is the computer systems.
Yeah, it's very literal.
Certain codes that you could do it one way because of the way the computer's programmed. You can access this part this way, but if you don't use a specific computer language,
Right.
it's not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you the truth of how it's set up, because it's all compartmentalized and they really don't know. So
Exactly.
they're
So
kind
there's
of
a
lost
friend of
the
mine
road.
who did this with AI. He asked the question, um, what would you say about so and so president? And it was like, oh, I can't write anything about that president. And he goes, what would you say about this president? It was all lovely and wonderful. So then he was like, if you didn't have to base it on all that you've been taught, what would you say about the first president? And then he could say it, or the computer could say it. Like it went around itself and removed its own bias, which I'm sure they're going to fix that because I'm pretty sure they don't want it. But this is almost the same thing. Like there's a glitch. Thank
You're
goodness.
absolutely correct. There's back doors and trap doors and things like that when you're going through systems. Another question. Yes, can you tell what you know about the risk to the therapist? And there's laughter in the audience. And Dr. Hammond says you would have to ask. Yeah, I'd like to know that. What kind of data do you have, given that you've had contact with large numbers of people, not just threats, but also any injury, any family problems that have arisen? That's one question. A second one is, are you aware of anybody that you've treated or others with this level of dissociation and trauma that have recovered, integrated, and are whole and happy? Dr. Hammond. Okay, I have one non-bloodline multiple, complex multiple, who had this kind of programming where you have a lot of access to the patient as neighbors, and where the doctor, by the way, you'll find physicians heavily involved. Thank you. They have to cover up because you get injured. That's what hair doctor's job was in my life. They've encouraged their own to go to medical school, to prescribe drugs, to take care of their own, to get access to medical technology and be above suspicion. There
Yeah,
have been,
that's the plain sight. It's all in plain sight, but we don't see it.
yes, how many CIA operatives do you have really around you? And that goes back to my city that I was raised in was so intense with these people. I mean, the lawyer wasn't safe, City Hall wasn't safe, the police weren't safe, my doctor was CIA, the witches were teachers.
Well, and
I
what's
mean,
crazy is when somebody comes and tells you the story, like, well, this is what happened. And they put me in the hospital, and then they said I was crazy, and then they put me in the insane asylum. And then I had to pretend like I was really crazy so I could get out of the insane asylum. It's just like, what in the ever loving hell? It's like something out of a movie.
yeah, well, that's because the movies tell you what they're really doing. So, I mean,
There you have it.
there you
Gosh,
have it,
how
kids.
stupid could I be to say that? True.
No, I mean, they tell you. And he says there have been a couple, in fact, in Utah who've been nailed now. We know in Utah have two full-time ritual abuse investigators with statewide jurisdiction under the the Attorney General's office to do nothing but investigate this, which he's talking about ritual abuse. He's talking about we're talking about 1992 in Utah ritual abuse. Um,
Wow.
when there have been survivors coming forward out of the Mormon church, LDS, whatever you want to call it, the level of MK Ultra victims and in that church system is mind-boggling. I also have just learned that the process church of the final judgment, which is tied into Manson and Son of Sam, and it's tied in with Scientology, and it's all these different factions that were going on, kind of new to the United States in the 50s and 60s. Um, they went to Utah and they pose as a animal rescue center. So it's really listening to these survivors coming forward. I would recommend, if people are interested, to do that, because when you're in a closed cult society like that, they get away with so much. And especially in a church with secret rituals, secret temples. Again, it's just like the secret societies. They have their temples and their secrets.
Well,
And
and
it
what's
just
crazy is if you're
thrives.
in charge of like the animal, whatever, it's a veterinarian hospital, but it also has an incinerator and it also has, drugs and also has all kinds of knives and different things. Like anything could go on there and you wouldn't know.
Exactly. And, when I look back to um, the different ways that the family interacted with other groups, for instance, okay, we had a pharmacist. He owned his own pharmacy where we got drugs. Well, he would trade drugs with the Hells Angels and get the street drugs that they used on us, like
Oh
the mellow
my
yellows,
gosh.
and do deals. And I was the entertainment for the bodyguard, sexually, because that was my job, for the family, was prostitution and stuff. So
Oh my God.
here would be the leader in the house with my father and the pharmacist making a drug deal while I was outside. And I would just take whatever that bodyguard had on hand, like tripping out with him, to get through that entertaining while they did the deal in the house. I remember that one really clearly. I was like 13, 14.
Do you have any suggestions? And this is way off topic, but do you have any suggestions on how somebody would know if a neighborhood or a town was taken like that?
Wow.
We'll do another
Pray
show on
about
that.
it. Pray about it. I don't move anywhere. God has moved me. I'm
Yes.
faithful, move me in, move me out of places. And it's not that I'm not sitting in a place where the CIA
Doesn't know
is
where you
very
are.
present.
Right.
Well, they know where I am at all times because
Right.
of the stim receiver in my head. Um, and when we were doing the book, of course, I had drive-bys and direct energy weapon attacks and everything else. Documents disappearing from the college library. Uh, I'd go to check them out and they were gone. And the library couldn't give me an explanation of why those MK Ultra documents they had in their archives were suddenly gone.
Right.
They were trying to stop me from seeing them. So, you know,
The
um,
internet kind of ruined their plans. Now she can get on the Russian servers and find more.
yeah, and definitely connecting to Dale Griffiths and finding him was
Sure.
saving grace in everything. But yeah, I would pray for discernment. Watch out for towns where there seem to be a large Masonic presence in that
Hmm.
town.
Yep.
I personally will never live in a city again. Um,
That has a
there's
Mason lodge or anything like
well,
that.
just in general, I don't want to.
Oh, a
Too,
city, like a
because
big city.
yeah, like
Yes.
like the city down the road where I
Got
went
it.
to college and went to the hospital, and they could interfere with me in those places. Um, and it's not they could drive up right now and stop this interview. It's
Sure.
not. But it's just importance of what is going on in my
Sure.
life. When we
Sure.
were doing the book, it was constant harassment, just absolutely constant. So um, they'll always pray about, ask God to give you discernment, open your eyes to see what's going on. Now, where I grew up was right off a military base, and there were
That's
a lot
probably
of,
another one you don't want to live near.
yeah, I would say that definitely don't want to be near a military base. The I had to service the neighbors so they would stay quiet about the odd things. The doctor, because my Dr. Green would pick me up in his van at my house, and leaving at the beginning of the night, not coming back till morning. We had one car, unless somebody else picked us up. I don't know. I was chloroformed, and taken out of the house. So, but I do remember having to service the major next door
So
to keep things
disgusting.
quiet. So, all right, one more question to
Yeah,
start on.
let's do one more and then we'll close it out for today and then we'll go on to however many parts we need.
All right. So, okay, in a poll done in the state of Utah in January, this is 1992, by the major newspaper and television station, they found that 90% of Utahns believe that ritual abuse is genuine and real. That's not
That's
typical in the
not
United
normal.
States.
That's not
So,
normal.
and okay, of course you can make the tie-in as to why they believe that, right?
Yes, we all are very intelligent here.
Not all of them believe it's a frequent occurrence, but some of that was imparted from 2 years of work by the governor commissioner on ritual abuse, interviewing, talking, meeting people, and gathering data. So this was a public operation back then. And what's interesting? There's cases now that are open knowledge in Utah that the attorney general, has brought forward about ritual abuse. It's like it's brought forward, but there's nothing done to stop it. They'll isolate on a case. Anyhow, now when people say, by the way, there's no evidence, they've never found a body, that's baloney. Yes, Oscar Mayer baloney. They found a body in Idaho of a child. They've had a case last summer that was convicted on first-degree murder charges. Two people that summer before that were arrested were the teenage girls' body parts were in the refrigerator, and they were convicted of first-degree murder in Detroit. There have been cases and bodies. And, you hear this all the time. I still get it. You're a liar. You're crazy. There has never been a case prosecuted, and it's just not true. However, what the problem, where the disconnect is there are very few states that have ritual abuse laws on the
Right.
books. So their convictions are not going to be on ritual
Right.
abuse. They're going to be on the crimes, the
Right.
murders, and
100%.
yeah.
Well, and it's
And
kind of like the way right now how they're changing the prison stuff to almost no matter what color somebody is, they're saying they're white unless they're like so obviously dark. It doesn't matter if they're Indian, if they're Mexican, if they're light black, they're saying they're white. And so it convolutes the statistics, and they can do the same thing, and they have done the same thing with sicknesses. They categorize things for their convenience. Like, it's very Hollywood too, because whenever somebody tries to invest in a Hollywood movie, they get pencil whipped, right? Because they take the accounting, they do, oh, well, you're going to get paid after this and after this and after this. But they didn't tell you any of that ahead of time, right? And so it's the same thing. It's that legalistic, nasty way of hiding things.
oh yeah, I mean, Lucifer is the master of deception, and so are his servants. And
Gosh, I hate
I
Lucifer.
think we, good is bad and bad is good. And we have been so, the more that's exposed, and thank God is being exposed, but the more that it is exposed, you're just sitting there going, how have I survived all
Right?
of this?
I know. Just even me, somebody that's never been involved with any of this stuff, I look back and go, all of this is a lie. Like our history is a lie. Who knows if the place is flat or not? NASA probably never went anywhere. What is going on here? It's crazy. All right, so let's leave it here. And then
All right.
let's ask if anyone has any last minute questions that is just burning in their heart. Do you have a scripture today that maybe you could pull up last minute? Or do you
Uh,
not have a Bible nearby?
I didn't bring it
It's okay.
into the room here.
That's okay.
This is my daughter's room.
That's okay. I just thought we could kill time in case somebody had a question, because there's a little bit of a delay before they would get it, and then they would have to write it, and it would just take a second. But thank you so much again. I appreciate it. I love doing this.
I do too. And I
I,
love the questions. And if you don't get your question in this time, write it down and come back or put it in the comments when I get to, if I get time. Life's pretty busy right now, but if I get time, I like to go back to the show. And if you want to write a question there and I see it, I will try and answer it for you. So there's that. There's also Twitter, and you can ask me questions there as well. So.
okay, cool. And then Deborah, I agree with you. She said, "Who do we trust?" This is what I will say about it. I have come to, it's so simple now. If someone isn't as kind as me, as considerate as me, as thoughtful as me, then I put a big question mark on them. It doesn't mean I treat them bad. It doesn't mean I ignore them. It means that they go to the outer circles of my life until they've proven to come in. How would you answer that, Cheryl?
Well, I have prayed for more and more discernment. And I will tell you, God has, because He's getting ready to move me into a new phase in my life, He has had me shut the door in the last 2 weeks on everybody here. I've been shunned by the church proper, and the main one in our town, right, for 25 years. And I have been shunned anew by a couple of the people who also had their problems with the church, but they got taken back in, right? And now that my ex is dating somebody that's like the royal family, I I suddenly got this nastiness on Facebook. Now all these people have my phone number, and God said to me, I need you to close the door on Facebook to all these people. They have your phone number. If they were a friend, they would be reaching out to you to see, and it's just, I need you to let all the old go and
You
get
have
ready for
me,
the
and
new.
I love you.
I know. But the people that I have in my life are mainly online that have proven who they are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and he's teaching me not to accept anything less. I've come a long way from doormat to you know
100% same. So guilty of it. Such a naive. Gosh, I was so naive, and I was righteous about it. I'm going to trust everyone. Why would I not? And so now now I'm the opposite. I'm like a little assassin. Ooh, I just saw something that was a red flag. You get two more of those and you're gone. Pow pow. And I don't mean literally, okay, YouTube. I'm not killing anyone. I'm just letting them out of my life. They are gone. They had their chance. They had their day in the sun. And I also have found that God is so good because I'll not want to have a conversation with somebody, but I feel like I owe it to him to tell the truth and to not confront them, but to, with grace, tell them what my issue is and why I'm not comfortable with them, either doing that in my presence or whatever. And every time they don't want to talk to me. And I'm like, thank you, Lord. Thank you for keeping me from having to have a hard conversation with somebody that isn't even willing to have the conversation either. So they need to grow up.
Yeah, and it's nice for me because I'm like cooties in this town right now. So there's not anybody, trying to get into my life in this town. It's because
Well,
God's
thank
given
God
me
you have your family. But I do think it's important that you have friends. And, Maria Farmer and I have had this conversation so many times because I'm always like, don't trust anyone. Don't trust anyone. Be very, 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 very careful. And, I'm protective of you that way too. But I do think, I think you can tell the ones that are doing it with an agenda. If you watch, you can figure out the agenda. Because I've actually helped a friend of mine who is very similar situation as Maria, not as big, help her discern the infiltrators.
Hmm.
Yeah, because they will come.
Oh, that's their job. And
Yeah, I
it's big time nowadays. So
yeah, I call them nuisance demons. So if somebody's even like an irritant to you, let that be a flag. That's a
yes,
flag. Have a conversation with them. Tell them. People aren't honest enough, and so they get stuck with these people that they really don't want in their life because they're not willing to have a hard conversation. So this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go have a wonderful dinner
oh,
with my
sounds good.
family, and we'll be back. Cheryl and I'll figure it out. It'll be sometime soon.
Yes. Thank you so much, Carmen.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, cutie.
Bye.